I thought that if I didn't spend every waking moment with this person wouldn't like me anymore. And if this person didn't like me anymore, I was fucked. Hey babes, welcome to Codependency Alchemy, the podcast. I am your host, Alyssa, and we are kicking off season 3. I hope you guys had an amazing little breaky poo from the podcast, or you got to use that time to catch up on previous episodes. To be honest, I am not excited about the season opener, but you guys noticed that I was avoiding doing an episode on the situationship. You guys called me out. I truly was hoping I could kind of like sweep it under the rug. Maybe we don't have to do a whole episode on it because it's the most cringy thing in the entire world to me. But yeah, like I said, you guys noticed and were like, so that episode on the situationship, we want that. And I was like, but do you? But do you want that? I don't think we need to talk about it. We literally talk about anything. We could talk about anything. But over the break, I was really reflecting on, what we're going to talk about here. And it just doesn't seem fair to not talk about the situationship because if I'm being completely honest, it's literally the only reason why I know as much as I know about myself and my patterns. It is the only reason why I think I am able to cultivate this healthy relationship and sustain this healthy relationship with Justin. I think that me being in that situationship in the 7 months that we were not together really was this deep awakening that I don't know would have happened otherwise had I not been kind of consumed by this person at this time. So I know I don't like talking about it, not because of the other person. I'm so grateful for that person in my life. That person changed my life quite literally for the better. And I will always hold such a reverence for it and him. However, talking about my patterns during that time is really embarrassing is the first word that comes to mind. It's extremely embarrassing because I look back at that time and I look back at how I acted and I look back at the things that I did and I'm like, how, this is shadow stuff, guys. How did I get that bad? How did I let it go that far? How was I so extreme in the worst ways, really being the toxic one? Not to say that I don't think that other person played a role in it. I think oil and water, they say, right? We were just two different people that magnetized to each other, but at the same time had our own shit that, I don't know what his experience was, but I'm just speaking from my own. I know that I was also very, I was toxic. I was my most toxic self, which is why I don't want to do this episode. It's why I don't want to do this episode, but it's also why I know I need to do this episode because this is why we're here, right? This is why I created the podcast to begin with, was because at that time, that 7 months where I was in the situationship where Justin and I weren't together, was the most lonely and isolating and scary time in my life because 1, I was certain I was going crazy. 2, I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could talk to about it because I knew how crazy it all was sounding and I was embarrassed over the things that I was doing. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know from the hundreds of you that have DM'd me and reached out to me saying I thought I was the only one who did this. I know how important it is for me to have this conversation with you guys, and it's really, really cringy. I just have to name it. This is actually terrifying for me to talk to you guys about. Speaking of codependency, right? Like, there's this just deep fear of being perceived negatively. There's this deep fear of being judged. There's this deep fear of like, you know, being seen in this negative light where it's like more people are potentially not going to like me, right? Like, naming these codependency patterns and these thoughts and these beliefs is really important when we're healing codependency, because they're real. They're real fears, and the more that we avoid looking at them, the harder it is to overcome them. So when I talk about managing and navigating codependency in my life, it's doing this. It's like speaking the truth to what is and being vulnerable with people. I know that just as many people who, you know, are going to like get the ick from me from this episode, there's just as many people who are going to be like, thank you so much for talking about this. I'm doing that same shit and I needed a reality check, you know, because I wish I would have had that. I wish I would have had someone that was just like, boom, Alyssa, what you're doing is fucking not okay. Like, and these are the reasons why. Let me rephrase that. Not this is not okay, but like, hey, this pattern is showing you something about you that really needs to be looked at. Instead, I was just like seeking out instead of going within. And it was the moment where I realized, okay, this is really about me. And I started tending to that, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I could have saved myself months and months of agony and cringy, embarrassing freaking things that I did. But I know I had to experience them, and I know I had to go through them so that I could have this conversation with you today. Right? Like, I love these non-judgmental affirmations that I learned from Matt Kahn. Actually, when I was in this time period of my life, we're just gonna call it the dark night of the soul. I feel like we should call it something else, like even more dramatic. But while I was in this time period, Matt Kahn was someone who kept showing up in my orbit. And if you haven't heard of him, definitely look him up. He's got a lot of really great talks on twin flames and soulmates. And there was one about non-judgmental affirmations. And some of them are, you know, everything helps everything. And if it could have happened any other way, then it would have. And when I think about this time in my life, I really anchored into those truths. Everything helps everything. Whatever I'm experiencing right now is going to help me in some way. Even if I can't see it right now, it will. And right now is a perfect example, right? Here I am being able to have this conversation with you because I did the things that I did and I experienced the things that I experienced. And it is helping. Not only is it helping me, but it's helping you. And so the other non-judgmental affirmation is, if it could have happened any other way, then it would have. And I loved that too, because I was really judging myself during this time of like, why did I not try to make things work with Justin? Why did I walk away so quickly? Why didn't I fight for it? And it was just like, if it was meant to happen any other way, then it would have. And I needed to go through my own, you know, initiation in this dark night of the soul time. And Justin needed to go through his too. Like, we had a very, very different experiences in our breakup. And both of them led us to huge awakenings, right? So even though we think of breakups as these like really terrible things that happened, I think it's the only reason why we're able to have a relationship the way we are now. And it required both of us letting go completely and surrendering and going on our own very separate journeys, right? So yeah, I am still trying to avoid the conversation by like talking about literally anything else. I'm noticing my patterns. It's like, fill the time with all the things so you don't have to talk about the thing. Okay, we're just going to talk about the fucking thing. We're just going to talk about it. It's going to be fine, Alyssa. You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. You will live. You will live. And my voice is now like, you do you hear the change in my voice? Okay. The situationship. I am seriously fucking sweating. Holy moly. It's embarrassing. I named it. It's okay. We're going to call situationship guy because why not? So me and Guy knew each other before Justin and I had broke up, and me and Guy kind of started hanging out immediately upon me and Justin breaking up. It was definitely one of the reasons why I don't think that I fought super hard to make things work with Justin, because I was getting all this attention, and my anxious attachment loves that shit, especially after having a relationship where there wasn't so much of that, because him and I were kind of like looping in these little like depressive episodes. So it was like a huge change in energy that I was receiving from Guy, and I loved it. I was totally trauma bonding to this person. Like, this person was filling this need that I had craved since I was a child, of like validation, love, praise, attention, and positive attention, right? And so I clung to it. I just was literally eating it up like fucking cake. And, I don't like to put tons of labels that we then use against people, but for the sake of the fact that I know a lot of you guys know what love bombing is, it felt very love bombing-ish, And by ish, I mean it was fucking love bombing. But I was just as much at fault as Guy was. So like constant good morning texts, constant how are yous, checking in throughout the day, a lot of like hanging out in the beginning stages, like just a lot of communication, and communication that was becoming predictable, right? Good morning texts. You start waking up and then you're getting this dopamine hit from the same person every single morning, right? So then the one morning that person doesn't text you good morning, your brain is like, hey, where's that hit? Because I get that hit every single morning. And then for the anxious attached person, hello, me, I immediately go into, this person's mad at me, this person doesn't like me anymore, this person's gone, I did something wrong, I need to fix it, right? So in the beginning, and it doesn't take long for this to happen, like this all took place, like I want to say within like a month, 2 months max, before I was like hooked and like starting to loop in some of these. I don't even think it was 2 months, you guys. I think it was like maybe 1 month. It wasn't very long at all. So got used to those good morning texts. It got more sporadic. The more sporadic it got, the more my anxious attachment started to flare up, right? So when Guy started, what I would call like pulling their energy away, right? Because I was becoming attached like quickly. With the quick, I was attached like within days, because this person I had created this codependency with, this person was responsible for my good feelings about myself. All the attention, all the doting, all the texting, all of the, the validation I had become quite literally like addicted to. I don't think that there's another word that better suits that. Like, I was addicted to it. He was now the provider of my good feelings about myself. And I didn't want to be alone. Like, that is the human condition, right? We want belonging. We want to be loved. We want to be, in partnerships with people. I have historically made my good feelings about myself and my worth based on my relationships. That proves to me that I am loved. This is something I've really had to unravel from and unlearn, that my relationship is not an indicator for how lovable I am or how worthy I am. So as the good morning text started slowing down, or the communication was slowing down, you guys, this was like years ago. So my memory is only going to serve me as well as it serves me. And I could not be remembering this exactly. So this is just like how my subconscious memory is remembering these things, was that like this person started pulling their energy away. I started getting way more anxious and clingy, meaning like I wanted to start hanging out every single day. I was like, hey, can we do dinner tonight? Hey, can I come over tonight? Like, hey, can I stay the night this weekend? Like, I was just quick with it. Like, I thought that if I didn't spend every waking moment with this person wouldn't like me anymore. And if this person didn't like me anymore, I was fucked. Like, it just went to like, you die if you are not constantly with this person, because this person won't like you anymore. You have to always be there. And so instead of me checking these beliefs and thoughts that I was not consciously aware of, like, I'm telling you guys that now, but I didn't know that that's what was happening in my subconscious mind at the time. I just thought, I really like this person and I want to spend all my time with this person. And that's normal for me to like want to spend all this time with this person. But the difference was that it wasn't this spacious, I want to spend time with this person, that like if he said no, I would be like, of course, no worries. It was this like anxious, I need to spend all my time with this person, because the fears were driving that desire to spend time with Guy. Like, my anxiety was built up so much that like I said already, thought that if I didn't spend all this time with this person, they were going to not like me anymore. And so for Guy, I don't want to like label him. However, think different attachment style, right? More avoidant. So it feels all good in the beginning, but when the anxious person wants to spend all this time with an avoidant person, the avoidant person gets uncomfortable because they feel like their independence is being taken away from them. So Guy wasn't really responding to messages the same way anymore, was too tired to hang out, all of these things. Like, it wasn't clicking the way that it was initially. And so the lack of communication that started to build upon itself was making my anxious attachment flare up even more. And something that I notice with anxious attachment that comes off avoidant because it's pulling away, it's actually like a more dark side of the anxious attachment person, where they pull their energy away as a way to try to manipulate the person who's avoidant to come in. And again, I was not consciously aware I was doing this. But looking back on it, it makes sense. I was trying to go in over and over again, right? Connect, be close, spend time together, because that's what my anxious attachment needed, was like that validation, that closeness. And so when I wasn't getting it, it's almost like what happened in my brain was like, okay, well, this doesn't work. So what happens when I pull my energy away or withdraw? And I can trace this pattern back to all of my relationships, sadly. But it's like, I'll withdraw to try to get that need met because closeness isn't getting that need met. So that's what I did with Guy. I was like, hey, you know what? It just sounds like this is not working. It sounds like, you're not ready for a relationship, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to come get my things and carry on. And like, best to you. It was, it was very like, I remember being very amicable and calm and grounded. And I don't think that was necessarily like a bad thing to do, because what we were doing was really toxic. What I was doing was really toxic, and like grasping for all this attention and trying to get my needs met through this person. So it probably was a good thing that I pulled away. But the shitty part is that it played into the push-pull dynamic in a toxic relationship, which I don't know. I don't know if I knew that at the time. I don't know. Everything helps everything, right? I cannot overanalyze it right here with you guys. Doesn't matter. What matters is I pulled away and he came in, right? He started texting me again more regularly. He was open to hanging out more often than he was before, and it was just really hard to hold that boundary, because I was like, oh, here I am getting my needs met again. Maybe he really figured it out this time. Maybe he realized he really does like me. So then what did I do? I came back in, and then I started being the same way, and then my anxiety got, went through the roof again, and I want to spend all my time with this person, and then he wanted to pull back again. And the story goes on like this for like a few months. this push, this pull. Because what happened when I pulled and he came in, I learned that that's what worked for him. If I wanted him to come in closer, I needed to pull away. And so that's what I ended up doing, like noticing myself doing, is that whenever I wasn't getting my need met from him, I would withdraw love, or I would withdraw my attention, and I'd put on this like facade that like, I don't need you, because I knew that it would call him in. And like, that is dysfunctional, people. That is toxic. That is called manipulation, right? And I started doing it through text messages. Like, if he wasn't responding, I would say something that I knew would emotionally like charge him, right? Or I would send a text message that had something that I knew was really interesting to him, that he would be interested in talking about, in order to get him to respond. Like, I got really, this is the embarrassing shit that I was fucking talking to you guys about. I got really, really toxic. I got really, really manipulative. And it makes me feel for this person, honestly, and it makes me feel for myself, because I don't think either one of us is right or wrong. But it's just like, these dynamics, a lot of us find ourselves in. And because there's not very much information about these dysfunctional ways of relating, we don't even realize what we're doing is causing a lot of dysfunction in our relationships. And that fucking sucks. Like, I took this guy on a fucking roller coaster ride, and I'm not the only one to blame. He took me on a roller coaster ride too. We were roller coastering together. And it's just because of our own lived experience, right? It's past relationships, past traumas, past, toxic relationships with people who manipulated us too, right? Like, these patterns are learned, and it's hard to unlearn them if you don't even have a conscious awareness of them. Because I'll tell you, a lot of the things that I was doing at that time, I thought were like the most loving things, the most kind things, the most sweet things. Like, there was this time where I was going to be gone for a few days. And so I wrote him a letter for like every day I was going to be gone. And the story that I had told myself was that like, this was such a kind thing to do, because like, there's some details like about where I was going to be, and I was going to actually be with Justin at that time. And I just didn't want him to like feel insecure or feel worried about like the way that I felt about him. But it was like, that was not for him. That was for me. I had the anxiety, right? I was doing for him what I would want, not necessarily what he wanted or needed, right? And what's so funny is like, I remember being like, if I don't get any response from any of these, like, how will I feel? Like, am I doing this manipulatively? Am I doing this with an attachment to an outcome? And I had totally like gaslit myself, bamboozled myself, because I was like, no, it's like, I don't care. Like, he could not respond to any of these little card note things that I have for him, and I would be totally fine. But guess what? I wasn't. I wasn't totally fine when he didn't respond to any of them. I was upset. Which tells me that it wasn't from the genuine kindness of my heart. It wasn't without attachment. It was with attachment. I wanted to get that same thing, that devotion, that attention that I was giving him. I wanted him to give to me. But I didn't just say that. I didn't say that to him. I just did this nice gesture and then wished that he would read my mind and do it back. And so when he didn't do it back, I was left feeling more anxious, and then I was left feeling resentful, right? I did this nice thing for you, and you're not going to do that nice thing for me. I did this nice thing for you, and you're not going to even acknowledge it. And this is the slippery slope with like, people who have codependency or, are in these types of dynamics where it's like, well, I did do this for you. I perceive your needs. I do this and this and this to help you feel better, but you don't do it for me. You guys, that is dysfunctional as fuck. And it's not working, right? Like, I think we can all agree that no one's winning from that situation, period. Because Guy is not winning by getting all these cards that he doesn't care about, that he doesn't need, that he didn't ask for. And now there's this whole story I have in my head about him and how like ungrateful and how rude he is, that like he didn't ask for that. But I created that dynamic by doing something that I thought a perceived need, right, of his would be, because I was going to be on a trip and my ex-boyfriend was going to be there, so he might be feeling some type of way, so I'm going to do this. Like, all assumptions based off of my own shit, not his. Not his. He probably didn't give 2 fucks. And I gave all the fucks. And then when he didn't give any fucks, I was like, where are all your fucks to give? And then I made it mean something about me. See, all of the attachments, like healing from codependency, you guys, is healing from all these like attachments to all these things. And so like, what could you do instead in that situation? Instead, I could have said, hey, I'm going on a trip and Justin's going to be there, and I just want to check in. How are you feeling? Is there anything that you need? That would have been a healthy way to have that conversation. And then he could have said, nothing, we're good, all is well. Have fun. I want you to go. Which actually, I feel like that's kind of a conversation we had, maybe not verbatim, but like it was kind of similar. Like, I remember him being like, no, like, go have fun. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I'm good. Couldn't take that. I was like, he's not good. But he's not good was actually, I'm not good. And so now I know like what I would do instead, what I would do today versus then, is I would tend to the part of me that was feeling anxious. I would tend to the part of me that was feeling worried. I would say, what is the fear that I have? Right? And the fear that I had at that time was, I'm going to go on this trip with Justin. This person, Guy, is going to feel some type of way and he's not going to like me anymore. He's going to leave me. Okay, so I'm afraid of being alone. And that's why I say I'm so grateful for Situationship Guy, is because I learned how to do shadow work. I didn't know that that's what I was doing at the time, but I learned how to do shadow work and I learned how to do inner child healing because of Situationship Guy. Not in the beginning. For the first like 5 months, it was very much me just looping in all of these like patterns that were really shit. And then we went into this no contact phase that was longer than the previous ones. So if you find yourself in, I hate calling it this because I think it can be really dangerous for people. It was really dangerous for me. The twin flame journey, or, your soulmate, et cetera, and the no contact. I really went into this spiritual psychosis thinking like this person is my twin flame, because everything that we were experiencing was how they explained the twin flame journey. But it made me stay in that situationship with that person for, I think, far longer than maybe I would have if I wasn't so attached to like this person being my twin flame. So if you're out there and you have attached to that language and it's got you looping and spiraling and you're going crazy, please reach out to me. Please. I spent months watching YouTube videos from tarot readers, like really enmeshing my energy with his. I can't tell you how many hours I spent. I can't tell you how deep and dark that dark night of the soul got for me, because I had clung on to this language with this person, and it literally makes you feel crazy. It makes you go a little crazy because you can't see anything outside of that, and you give so much grace to that person in the name of them being your twin flame. That's why actually Matt Kahn's uh talk on twin flames and soulmates is really, really helpful. Actually, I feel like that almost kind of like hit me upside the head like a fucking like big ass textbook, and just like smacked me like, wake the fuck up, bitch. um so that was really helpful. Just want to throw that out there for you guys. But I really had to like get shaken out of that mindset, because it was really dangerous. I even got to the point, where I was like pulling tarot cards for myself, pulling tarot cards for him. Again, like I said, enmeshing energies, which is not okay. Like, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Like, that is not okay. And what happens when you're enmeshing energetically like that over and over again, it makes it extremely hard to live without this person constantly looming. Like, it took me years to unmesh from this person's energy. Even still now, it will come in every once in a while, and I have to like do energy hygiene. Which, if you don't know what that is, I learned that from one of my mentors, my old mentors, Naomi Love, about energy hygiene. And it's just really, really helpful to make sure that like you're clearing anyone from your space. I'm going on so many tangents, you guys. I hope you're following. But I am going to talk about that in our next episode a little bit more, because it's one of the questions that came in from the Instagram broadcast channel, is around like emotionally detaching from people. So I won't get into it in this episode, because do you see what I'm doing still? I'm trying to like not talk about the situationship, so I'm talking about anything else that I could possibly talk about. So those are some of the things that I was doing, right? I was writing him letters. I was, at one point I like showed up to his door because he wasn't like answering my messages, and I really wanted to like leave this letter for him, and I like left this letter for him. Oh my God. Oh my God. I totally forgot about that letter. You guys, I wrote this letter. I wish I still had it, actually, because it's probably pretty good. But I delivered it to his house in moments of, that's what I was talking about, moments of separation, right? Moments of no contact. And throughout our situationship, we were kind of on a cycle. Not kind of, it was like very, very predictable. We would have a few days of a lot of contact, connecting, apologizing, feeling really good, saying we're going to move forward. And then it would break off, and then we wouldn't talk for 2 weeks. And then we would have a conversation, apologize, say what we were going to fix, how we were going to fix it, what we were going to do, how much love we had for each other. It would be good for a couple days, break off, not talk for 2 weeks. And this went on and on and on and on. But there was 1 month where it was like there wasn't really a rupture. There wasn't really a conversation, but we just stopped talking. And it was like for 2 months. It was a lot longer. And that's when I learned how to do shadow work and inner child work, because there was literally no conversations. And this was after the letter. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. That letter, you guys, that I wrote, I realized after the fact, like, that was for me. Kind of going back to me writing those little notes for him while I was on my trip, like, those were for me. That letter I wrote to him, that was for me. Like, I could have, and I wish I would have, and I do now, so it's fine. Everything helps everything. Used him as a mirror for seeing myself more deeply, right? What I was saying to him was really what I needed to be saying to myself. What I was trying to help him feel, that love, that devotion, that care, that unconditional love, was really what I needed to be providing for myself. And so I think relationships with certain people are brought into our lives to show us that we have the capacity to give, this unconditional love, this compassion, this grace to other people, and we can give it so easily and so freely. And how can we now translate into giving that to ourselves? Right? So in that like 2 months of no contact, I started doing a lot of inner work. I stopped watching the YouTube videos. I put the tarot cards away. I was like, I have to like separate from all of these like energies that have me, obsessed over this person. And I went out in nature almost every single day. I just stuck to my journal. It was just me and my journal. I didn't even have social media at that time. So I didn't have to like worry about that. But just really, really tuned into myself. I took loads of baths. I did a lot of meditations. I started doing soul retrievals with myself, which again, I didn't even have this language. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was that I had a lot of fears that were being triggered. I had a lot of core wounds around abandonment and rejection being triggered. And I just started asking more questions. I was like, where does this live in my body? Like, how can I tend to you? What do you need? What do you want? And beginning to use these fears and these beliefs that were coming up for me through the situationship as a way to meet myself more fully. So like I eventually got there. I eventually got there, and now I continue to do that, like with myself, yes, but this is now what I teach others how to do, like how to use our lived experiences as access points to meeting ourselves more deeply, how to use our relationships with others and our triggers and our activations and our fears and our doubts as a way to alchemize and heal something, a core wound within us that is just up at the surface to be seen. Because I think what happens is we get so attached and entangled up in the stories that we have and our physical realities and our partners and what they're doing and what they're not doing, instead of just saying, what is my partner not doing this one thing? What am I making that mean? Like, if we start having that conversation, then we can start actually having solutions that are supporting our relationships and growing and evolving and feeling more spacious and peaceful. But instead, we kind of loop in the things, like what I was making Guy, situationship Guy, like his acts mean about me, like him not wanting to hang out. What am I making that mean about me? Instead of being like, you know, what's coming up for me when he doesn't want to hang out with me? But instead, and then seeing, right? And then seeing, oh, I'm making that mean that he doesn't like me. And if he doesn't like me, then I'm not lovable. And if I'm not lovable, then I'm going to end up alone. Okay, well, how can I tend to the part of me that feels unlovable and is afraid of being alone? Where does that live in my body? That fear. And like even just asking myself that question right now, like I feel it like the back of my heart, and it feels this like purplish, bluish color. And if I were to ask it what it wants, what I hear is joy. It wants joy. What does it need from me? And I just heard like, it needs you to put this down, right? What's this? And I just heard responsibility, right? I didn't used to hear this so clearly. Some people are clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, where there's just like a knowing, a feeling. The more that I ask my body these questions, the clearer and the more vibrant the conversations have begun. Now I feel like I'm channeling, and my brain is having a hard time talking now. the more I have these conversations with my body, the more it communicates to me in a more clear and concise way. And so when I first started asking these questions, it was very like all over the place and I was kind of getting confused by it. But I kept going back and I kept going back and I kept going back. So it's like, I love that I was able to do that just now with you guys on the podcast, because it's like, yeah, like where are we putting like all this responsibility on our shoulders? It's keeping us from living into our joy. This part of us wants joy, and it needs me to put down responsibility for carrying all of this for everyone, right? And so when we actually start talking to our bodies, we're going to start getting clear directions, which is what so many of us are seeking, right? I want clear directions. I want someone to tell me how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, what it looks like. But it's going to look different for every person. Every person's experience, lived experience, is different, is unique to them. That's why when I'm coaching, when I'm mentoring, when I'm holding space for people, I ask the questions for you to get to the answers for yourself, right? And I think what we've seen in healing spaces is that you have the person who wants to be healed and they have this idea that they're broken, they need to be fixed, and you are the person that's going to fix me. And that's codependency, right? That's giving your power away to somebody else. That means my healing is dependent on you being the provider of that. And that's why what I do is very opposite of that, in the sense that I cannot heal you and I will not pretend like I can, and I will not act as though I can. I will hold space for you and offer you invitations and reflections and questions for you to get to that answer, right? But there's no way that I can possibly tell you what you need in order to heal and transmute something within you, because I don't know what that part of you needs. But I do know the questions that I can ask you to help you access that, right? And I did a whole post on my Substack because I was getting so many questions of like, how do I, if I want to do inner child work and I want to do it, on my own, like, what do I do? So I did a whole like literal 10-step process. It's the same 10 steps I use for myself. It's what I would walk you through in the membership if you were to join a call. So you can do it over and over and over again. I even attached a meditation to that newsletter, an inner child meditation, so you could like hear even what that process sounds like. And I'll link that newsletter in the show notes below so you can access it. It's free. So 10 steps, you can bookmark it, go back to it every single time until it becomes more natural to you, until you get in the flow of it. Yeah, people who have worked with me in the past are like, I love that what you do is just continuously the same process, because it allows me to access it. And like, I can hear you in my voice, like, okay, where does this live in my body? What does this part of me want? What does this part of me need? Et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so there's that. Now, like I said, in this like 2-month span of no contact with situationship guy, I did a lot of inner work. I did a lot of healing, soul retrievals. I was noticing all of my unresolved trauma that came from my sexual abuse from my dad growing up, that I thought that I had handled, that I thought that I had navigated and dealt with and quote unquote healed. So when that was coming up for me, my abandonment wounds, my rejection wounds, my betrayal wounds, not just from my dad, but from my mom, who, I felt, didn't listen when I told her, right? Like, I felt not listened to and not heard, and yeah, betrayed by the people who like I was supposed to be protected by. And, felt really annoyed at first that was coming up for me, because I was like, oh, I thought that I was fucking done with this shit. I thought I healed it. I did the forgiveness thing. Like, I should be past this, right? And that is another thing that I really try to articulate to the people who work with me or come alongside me, is that like, this isn't some journey that you arrive to a destination and then you're healed and you never have to tend to it again. And I think that because I had that notion for so long, it actually kept me stuck, because every time it came up for me again, I would put myself down like what I was just saying, you should be past this. You already healed it. Oh, so you didn't do it good enough. You're going to need to go to another healer. You're going to need to go to an energy worker. You're going to need to like go to someone or something outside of you. Like I started noticing all my codependency patterns just really coming up to the surface of like, seek outside of you, seek outside of you, seek outside of you. And in that time, I felt like I shifted something where it was like, this comes up as often as it comes up. And you learn how to hold yourself through it when it comes up. And that permissioning of like forgiveness for my unresolved trauma coming up again doesn't mean that you did it wrong, doesn't mean you did it bad, doesn't mean that you know, are broken, but that it just means you get to almost like the way I see it is like grow your capacity even more. Or, you know, some people use like the layers of an onion. You're just like getting to another layer of the onion, right? Then it was just like, it was more spacious. It wasn't like this judgment that I then held against myself, which would lead me through a shame and guilt spiral, which would make me spin out even more. It was just like, oh, beautiful how this is coming forward again for me to look at this more deeply and transmute it even more, right? Because you have to remember what we're holding in our bodies is from generations of people before us, generations of traumas before us. So it makes sense that certain things are going to come up again and again and again. So to sum up the situationship, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I have anxious attachment, which I did not know before. I learned that I had codependency, which I did not know before. I began to study codependency and I started to study insecure attachment. And I took that time to really learn myself more. I also went into what I would probably say is like a spiritual psychosis with the whole twin flame journey. So that definitely absorbed me for a period of time where I had made guy in the situationship this the other person in this twin flame journey with me, and that I was destined to be with him, and that we were going to be like each other's greatest gifts. Well, and that's what's crazy though, is like I do consider him one of my like life's greatest gifts, because if it weren't for him, I don't know that I would be the person I am today. I don't know that I would know as much about myself as I know today. So during that time when I was like hearing, right, talk about spiritual psychosis, when I was like hearing like, this is the person who you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with, or like, that's not even what I was hearing. I was just hearing like, this person is the greatest gift like to your life. And I was thinking like that we're going to spend the rest of our lives together. Like that's how I was translating it. But like now, right, hindsight's always 2020. It's like, no, it was the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts to my life, because of what I got to heal and what I got to tend to and what I got to learn about myself. But that didn't necessarily mean that like he was the person I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with, you know? So I think another thing that was really supportive in that situationship was that I learned how to identify my attachments to things, right? I noticed my obsessive nature to ideas and just clinging to them and holding on to them, and then trying to control them through my actions, right? By overgiving, or by self-sacrificing, or by, you know, making myself small. Like there were so many times in that situationship where I was so anxious, but I identified that as love, right? I was like, this is what love feels like, where there's this like fire in your belly and you get butterflies and you're nervous around them and like all of these things. But really, like, not to say that there wasn't love there, but like that was my anxiety, right? Because I always just felt like I wasn't enough and I needed to try to prove that to this person. And that's why, like, when I talk about with my relationship with Justin, like the whole no spark episode, right? Which I love that you guys love that episode. But when we get into these healthy relationships with people, that it doesn't trigger our trauma in such an intense way, it feels boring. It can feel boring. It can feel like dull. Like, oh, there isn't this like fire and this like, spark, quote unquote. But it's like, no, is that spark really just anxiety? And is that anxiety actually leading you into changing yourself in order to like meet a need through this person, rather than learning how to meet that need for yourself? Which is really what I try to teach here, right? It's like, how can we meet our needs for ourselves? Not to say that we cannot receive from our partners and like allow them the opportunities to meet our needs as well, but that we aren't dependent on our needs being met by someone or something outside of us continuously. Because at the end of the day, like that person may or may not be there, and you get to feel sad and mournful and grieve, of course, but you don't want it to like absolutely rock your sense of self if or when that happens. Before, with a breakup, I experienced it in every single one. I was like, who am I if I'm not this person's partner? What do I like? What do I not like? What do I want? What do I not want? Like, I had no idea, because I had fond in every relationship I had ever been in, right? And now I'm in this relationship with Justin in a completely different capacity, where it's like, I just trust that our journey is going to go for as long as it goes. I trust that if this doesn't feel aligned for Justin anymore, that like we can have that conversation. And because I unconditionally love him, I want him to be happy. And if he's not happy in this relationship anymore, then like I want him to find that. Like that is a level of detachment that I think is possible for all of us. And it doesn't mean that you don't care. It quite frankly means the opposite. It means I care enough to not make you stay with me because it makes me feel better about myself, right? I care enough to trust your own autonomy and your own knowing that if this isn't bringing you joy anymore, I want you to find your joy. I could not say that 5 years ago. I could not say that 10 years ago. I needed a ring. I needed a wedding. I needed all of the things, right? Even if we were to have children, I would still say, like, if and when this doesn't feel aligned for you anymore, I trust that for you. Like, I will always have love for you, and I always want your happiness, and I want the same back from whoever I'm spending my life with. And I know I got that from Justin when we broke up, that like unconditional love. It was so amicable, it was so peaceful, it was so kind, it was so loving, that like I know that if that something changed for me, he would offer me that same love. And it is a new way of being, because I don't think that that's really been modeled. And I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong way. I'm not saying like this means that if you're married, that's bad. Like, I'm not saying those things, but it's like, what gets to happen in our relationship when we actually soften even more into unconditional love, meaning I love you no matter what. Whether you are my husband or not, I want you and your joy. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that this situationship brought me, was a deeper level of detachment, because I was literally like attachment to fucking everything. I had never been so grasping and controlling in my entire life. It was like this intense contraction where I was trying to control every single little thing in my life, that it broke me, and it reminded me that I have no control whatsoever. And then right after that, the pandemic happened, where I had even less control. And it was just like, just imagine like what happens when before a star like explodes or whatever. I don't know, is that what happens? It's just like that's what I'm seeing in my head. It's like this huge contraction where like all this energy is kind of pulled into the center, and then there's just like nowhere else for it to go but to like explode and disintegrate into 1,000 little pieces and like release. And that's what it felt like for me. It was just like, look at all the ways you try to control every single little thing in your life. And of course, why did I try to do that? Because I didn't have control as a child, and my control, like I felt out of control as a child, given my, sexual abuse and trauma, that I grew up trying to control literally everything. And the situationship like exacerbated that. And so, yeah, I'm fucking grateful for it. I'm grateful for all of the little opportunities that I got to see where I would try to control things and how I would try to control things, so I could start pattern tracking and seeing, the things that I was doing and asking myself, who was I really doing it for? And 9 times out of 10, I was doing it for me, but I had convinced myself I was doing it for them. And so I actually want to recommend a book that is, I think, super helpful in like language and giving examples of different levels of attachment. It's called The 5 Levels of Attachment by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. It's a quick read. It's like it's pretty short and small, but it, I think, is super, super helpful. I recommend it in like my my healing circles and groups all the time, like the mastermind. I was like, get this book, y'all, get this book. It gives really good examples just about like attachment and like how we attach certain things to our identity and all the things. So definitely check it out if that feels aligned. But yeah, I think we did it. We did the situationship story. I, maybe did not get into so much detail of everything, but I did share the things that I remember that I hated the most or disliked the most about what I did. But it was actually kind of hard to like remember all the details because it was so long ago. But yeah, all in all, that time in my life is literally probably one of the most healing times of my life. Like I learned so much about myself in the worst way, but it made a lasting impression. And I think that I'm 1,000 times better for it. I have so much love for the person who was in that situationship with me and who they were and what they were for me. And I just, I wish nothing but the best for them, and I'm super grateful for the experience. I've come a long way. So I hope this episode helped illuminate some things for you guys. I hope I didn't give you the ick too bad, and if I did, I trust. Levels of detachment, right? I trust. And let me know what you guys thought about this episode. If you listen on Spotify, you can use the Q&A at the bottom of the episode. If you watch on YouTube, you can let me know in the comments. You can DM me on Instagram. I love hearing from you guys, and that's what we have for you. If you haven't joined the Substack membership, I talk about it on every episode, but it's an opportunity for us to connect, like actually connect on Zoom calls. We do monthly masterclass. This last month we did how to stop feeling responsible for other people's feelings and moods, and it was amazing. All the replays are on my Substack as well. So when you join the membership, you get access to all previous masterclasses, and you can watch them as many times as you want. And yeah, join us for our monthly meetups and such. It's only $9 a month or $90 for the year. So you get 2 months for free. And the link to join the membership is also going to be in the show notes or the description box below. I hope you all have a beautiful freaking day. I'm excited to embark on season 3 with you all. I will be inviting you guys to suggest episode topics in the broadcast channel on Instagram. So if you ever want to like suggest an episode, make sure you're in that broadcast channel. I'll also leave the link for that in the description box below. I put like a little question box, then you guys can drop in your topics, which the next few episodes are all based off of topics that were suggested from the broadcast channel. So I really want to make this podcast about you, your experiences, what you're going through, and give you the most supportive feedback, advice, guidance that I can possibly give you based off of shit that I learned along the way. So, thank you for letting me be a part of your journey, a part of the process. Thank you for letting me walk alongside you. I love you all so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye. And here's a clip from next week's private podcast episode on Codependency Alchemy, the membership on Substack.
Says yes if I stay awake.
Okay, beautiful. Will you ask it, what does that look like for them, for this part of you?
Leave at the first sign of violence.
Mm-hmm. Can you do that?
I don't have a good track record for that.
Which is why, right? Which is why this part is like, hey, if you're going to lead, this is something that we need, right? We need you to stay awake and leave at the first sign of violence.
I think like me, the Issa part is feeling a lot of fear that like I have all this responsibility now to create the beauty or to protect the beauty that I've created. And that feels really scary to me for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
to be
Mm-hmm.
like fully responsible.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're bringing that up because that is a reason why most people who experience codependency don't actually do this work, because the responsibility that comes with it is fucking terrifying, right? It's like that means I'm responsible for my happiness and I'm responsible and have to take accountability for what works and for what doesn't work. And I don't have anyone to blame and like it's all on me. Like that can be super overwhelming. So I'm so glad you're naming that. And what if it's not that you have to protect it? What if it's that you get to, like, what I'm seeing is like writing the screenplay? Like, you get to write the story. So instead of it being something that you have to guard, like, it'll be going back to like what we started with, it'll be taken away. Instead, like, you're writing the play, you're writing the screenplay. What direction does this play want to go into? Is it going to go into the distraction and we have like a dark and scary, ominous experience? Which it's like sometimes part of the play involves that. Sometimes my play involves that until I'm like, wait, this is not fun. I don't like this part of the play. Like redirect. I'm gonna go a different route, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the gift of free will, right? Is that we always have free will to choose what direction we go. And the only thing that you need to do is continuously filter your life through how you desire to feel.